Hey, it's Ken Lewis. Welcome back to Mixing Night. So your drums aren't hitting right, huh? EQ's not helping it this time. Compression just is not doing the trick. I may know what ails you. Stick around. I'm going to give you suggestions to fix it. Man, I hope you heard that drastic difference in the sound of the kick drum against the 808. The only thing that I'm changing is the phase relationship between the kick and the 808. And I'm doing that with this auto align plugin that not only looks at phase, whether you should flip the phase or not, but it's also looking at timing. So it's adjusting if the kick is hitting here and the 808's hitting here, it's going to adjust that and make the two of these hit together. And then it's also going to look at the phase relationship and see which is better, inverted or regular. In this case, we have it only time aligned it by 8 samples, but it also phase corrected it, and that's where we get this huge boost in the overall sound and even volume of the kick drum. Listen again so you can hear once more what I'm talking about. I'm going to start with it off, and then when I click this on, you'll hear the huge difference in the kick drum. Listen again. Okay, so how did we get there? I'm just going to start from scratch on both of these and walk you through real quick. So you need to make one master and one the slave that reacts to that. So I'm going to take this one on the 808 and I'm going to put this out of send 1. I'm going to take this on the kick and I'm going to make that receive one. So it's looking at what the 808 is sending to it. So all of the information the 808 is sending out, what the kick is really extracting from that in real time is how it hits against the 808. And then it's just looking at the best relationship between how the waveforms line up and how the timing lines up with phase. Here we go. You see, it doesn't take long. It just needs a little bit of time to analyze one signal against the other, figure out where the best setting is, drop that in, and then you should be good for the rest of your mix. Okay, now I'm going to take you to two things that you probably wouldn't even think would react with each other. One-shot kick drums. Different collections, they're different sources. Why would these things even affect each other? But they do. So anytime that you have two one-shots hitting together at the same time, you should, on a snare or a kick really, you should definitely be checking your phase relationships and seeing better or worse, which one is better, which one is worse, when you correct it. Now let me show you. I'm going to play these two kick drums for you. Here we go. I'm going to play them for you individually and then together, and then I'm going to auto align the two of them together, the top to the bottom. And we'll see better or worse. Did we correct it? Did it fix it? Did we not? Okay, here's 1 into 2. Now both of them together. Okay, we're going to see what kind of correction we can get out of this. So I'm going to put auto align on this, and I'm going to make this the master, and I'm going to make the other one look at this. I'm going to send out of 1, and I'm going to, on the second kick, I'm going to receive 1. And then I'm just going to let it loop, and I'm going to let it detect. Sometimes it takes a while. Let's find out. There we go. Huge difference. Okay, listen all. A, B, off is no correction. On is the auto align. You see also it phase reversed and it moved at 12 samples. Here we go. Okay, so what you're listening for with phase, especially with drums, is the low end weight. So uh, you want to listen for the subs and for that low end impact, and ask yourself when you're combining these two kick drums and you're analyzing the phase and you're listening for better or worse. It's just like being at the eye doctor. This isn't a this is right and this is wrong. It's more like this is better, this is not quite as good. And you're listening for those subtle to massive changes with phase before you touch anything else, so that when you reach for that EQ, your frequencies are in line as possible and you'll have the most effect with that equalizer or that compressor. Now, I'm going to take you to a live drum kit and give you one more demonstration with how to correct multiple microphones on the same source. I have kick, snare, hat, cymbal, and room. So what I'm going to do is show you how to align all of these microphones together to have one coherent phase in your drum kit. This is not necessary, but if it helps tighten up your sound, then this is why we do it. I mean, keep in mind, for decades, we recorded drums and mixed them with the only phase correction going on with what the engineer did in the room in real time. So we didn't have these detection tools and correction tools before. We only had a phase reverse and that was it. So now we have better tools. We can use them a little bit more. And now with these types of corrections, we're always asking ourselves better or worse, better or worse. It's not a, this is amazing, this sucks. It's usually not that black and white. So I'm going to play you this full drum kit. When I originally recorded this, I recorded 2 microphones on the kick and 2 microphones on the snare, combined them and phase corrected them in real time then. So now I'm going to take that signal and I'm going to make the snare listen to the kick and correct that. Let's listen to that first. Let's listen to just the bleed on the kick drum that is hearing the snare. You can hear that snare loud and clear in the kick drum mic, and vice versa. I'm going to solo the snare mic and you can hear the kicks and the cymbals and hats and everything else in the snare mic. And even though those signals are fairly low level, they still interact with each other. And if there's any phase incoherency, they're going to fight and cancel each other. So the first thing I'm going to do is align the snare drum to the kick drum. And I'm going to make the kick the source. I'm going to make the kick on 1. And I'm going to make the snare look at 1. And let these run. And I'm going to solo these 2 so you only hear this correction. And let's see what this does. Okay, so no phase reverse, but we have 154 samples that it shifted that snare to the kick. So it was probably something like that, and now it's like that. Let's listen again. I'll bypass it and bring it back in. Here it's just a little bit duller and a little bit darker and just doesn't hit quite as hard when the phase isn't in. Okay, now I'm going to take the left cymbal overhead and correct its timing to the snare drum. So I've corrected the snare to the kick. Now I'm going to correct the left cymbal to the snare, which has already been aligned to the kick. So out of the snare, which is here, I'm going to send it out of 2. And on the left cymbal here, I'm going to pick up 2 on the auto align. I'm pretty sure this is how most alignment tools work. So auto align is not the only one that does this. Let's solo the snare and the left overhead and do some correction on the left overhead and see what happens. Boy, you can really hear that snap into phase when it happens. So if you're not familiar with what phase is and how to hear it, it kind of makes you want to turn your head a little bit and just, it's kind of like an unsettling feeling. And once you start identifying what that unsettling feeling is and why it's happening, then you can start much more easily hearing phase and when you need to correct it. Let me bypass and bring this back in so that you can hear what I'm talking about. You hear how the stereo image kind of just went from like way wide to snapped a bit more into focus for us. Okay, let's hear it again. Okay, now I'm going to take the right overhead and align it to the left overhead. So to review, I have aligned the snare to the kick, the left overhead to the snare, and now I'm going to align the right overhead to the left overhead. I could, if I wanted to, align the right overhead to the snare and the left overhead to the snare as well. There would be nothing wrong with that. Personally, I tend to find that I want my two cymbal mics sounding as good together by themselves as they possibly can, so I do the correction between the two microphones themselves. I'm going to feed out of the left side on send 3, and I'm going to pick that up here. 1, 2, 3, receive 3. I'm only going to listen to the left and right overheads here, and let's detect. First off, you hear how wide this is. These shouldn't sound, they sound outside of the speakers, or if you're in headphones, you're going to hear this kind of weird, make you want to turn your head effect. So let me try that again, and just so you know what you're listening for. 321 samples and phase flipped. Okay, let's hear the difference. What you're going to hear is a really wide out of phase signal get a little bit closer and more coherent in the center of the stereo field. Again, this is just a better or worse scenario. Here's starting with off. Okay, so now the right cymbal is aligned to the left cymbal to snare, snare to kick. Okay, let me try and bypass all of these real quick so you can hear without it, and then I'll put them right back in. Again, these are subtle differences, but subtle differences pile up over the course of an entire production and mix. Everything gets a little bit tighter and more coherent, more powerful, crisper, and all without any EQ or compression. And then the great thing about correcting the phase is then when you do add an equalizer, you have more of a foundation in which to grab onto with that equalizer and affect real change instead of just fighting against, bad phase incoherency to begin with. Okay, so I've given you a lot of things to consider with phase. Always check your phase anytime you have multiple microphones on the same sound source, or multiple one-shots hitting together, or a kick and an 808 hitting together as well. Always check that phase before you try other plugins. This has been Ken Lewis for Mixing Night. I'll see you on the next one. My YouTube channel is the most badass on the block, and you want to be a member. Subscribe right now. Do it. What? Okay, I saw you. I saw that. You got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that subscription. Peace.